Day one of the 2024 NFL Draft is in the books, and I think it's fair to say it could not have gone much better for the New York Jets. Let's break down what happened today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, April 26th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, we are through the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft, and the New York Jets have a new left tackle, Olu Fashanu. It capped a night where I thought the Jets just handled things magnificently. I am thrilled with the way things played out for the New York Jets. In fact, I think the Jets handled the whole process magnificently from start to finish. It goes beyond the player the Jets picked, who I think is a perfect fit for this team, who I think could be a franchise left tackle for the New York Jets for years to come. But I just love everything that happened. Now, I don't love that the Jets lost Rome Odunze because I love Rome Odunze. There was a run on the top three receivers early on. Marvin Harrison Jr. going to Arizona, Malik Neighbors coming to New York, but with the Giants. And then just before the Jets pick at 10, at the 9th pick, the Chicago Bears draft Rome Odunze, which pretty much took the Jets out of the market for a wide receiver. So what happened at this point? The Jets traded down. And if you're a long-time listener to the show, you know I love a trade down because the NFL draft is about quantity as much as it is quality. NFL draft is very unpredictable. The more picks you have, the better your team is. But I especially love adding extra picks in that round 2 to 4 range. And the Jets were able to add an extra 4th-round pick. They made a trade with the Minnesota Vikings. They give up 10. They get 11 back. And the other terms of the trade are, in addition to 11, the Jets got a 4th-round pick from Minnesota, 129, and a 5th-round pick, 157. And the Jets did send a 6th-round pick, 203. That's the Zach Wilson pick to Minnesota. So essentially, Jets moved down one spot. And in exchange, they got a 4th-round pick and swapped this a 6 for a 5. So that's pretty good, especially that 4th-round pick. I love adding picks in that range. And they only moved down one spot. And beyond only moving down one spot, they allowed the Vikings to move up for a player the Jets had no interest in. The Jets were never going to draft J.J. McCarthy. So really nothing's lost because all the players you were interested in are still going to be there when you're picking. And there were some surprises in the top 10, especially Michael Penix Jr. Going to Atlanta. And it put the Jets in the position where they could take advantage. On Thursday's show, and this, if you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast. We cover the New York Jets. We have new episodes each weekday, Monday through Friday. On the Thursday show, one of the things I mentioned, and it was pertaining to the possibility of the Jets moving up from 10 to 9, is that I really hate the move where you're trading up only one spot because you're not really gaining a whole lot and you're giving something up. Well, the flip side of that is I love a trade where you only move down one spot because you're not giving up much and you get something in return. And the Jets really lost nothing. It's not even that they gave up anything because, again, McCarthy wasn't a guy who was really on their board. We know they weren't going to take a quarterback in the first round this year. So essentially, all the players they were interested in, they were all still available. And anybody who was available at 10 was still available at 11 because they were never going to pick McCarthy. But beyond that, I love the pick of Olu Fashanu, and he's going to play a role on the team this year. He's going to play a role on the team for years to come. But I especially love, and no disrespect to Brock Bowers, and we've talked extensively on the show about why Brock Bowers would just be a pick that was too risky at 10, and I think the same would have been true at 11. When the Jets traded down one slot, I still had some trepidation because I thought the Jets were going to pick Bowers because that's been all the buzz leading into the draft. And during Joe Douglas's tenure, the Jets have not exactly been a tight ship when it comes to stuff like this. People have known who the Jets were interested in, leading into many drafts. Everybody knew they were taking Zach Wilson 2nd overall in 2021. A year later, all the buzz heading into the draft was about the Jets drafting Sauce Gardner at 4, and we knew they were taking a receiver at 10. Probably that was Garrett Wilson. Last year, it kind of came back to bite the Jets because there was all the buzz about the Jets taking Broderick Jones, and that kind of facilitated a trade where the Patriots were able to trade down, the Steelers were able to trade up, and the Jets lost out on Jones, and they ended up in a situation that was still not clear. A year ago, right now, we were talking about the Jets making a surprising move by taking Will McDonald and trying to make sense of it. What happened this year? This year, all the buzz was the Jets were taking Brock Bowers, but it was a smokescreen. Jets did a great job. Jets put false information out there, and it benefited them. Everybody thought they wanted Brock Bowers. Apparently, they didn't. And now it's coming out after the draft. They really weren't that interested in Bowers. Not only that, Olu Fashanu was a guy who wasn't mentioned a whole lot. When you heard about the offensive lineman the Jets were interested in, Fuaga from Oregon State was the name you heard the most often. You didn't really hear a lot about Olu Fashanu heading into the draft. So I think when all things considered, when you look at the way the Jets handled this, I mean, yeah, I guess like you could say I probably would have liked to have gotten Rome Odunze. That probably was my top choice, but I love how this played out. There aren't many times in my fandom with the New York Jets where I've been able to say the Jets look really smart in the NFL draft. I think this is a day where you could say the Jets just handled it so perfectly. And, this is a front office that's received a lot of criticism over the last year. And I think a lot of the criticism has been deserved. But on the same note, when they do things this well, I think they deserve a lot of credit. I think this was a forward-thinking move. I love the addition of the extra 4th-round pick. This is a year, it's true in general, but this is especially a year. This is viewed as a very deep draft class, and there are going to be good players available once we get even into the 4th round. And adding extra picks from that 2 to 4 range, that 2nd round to 4th round, that's something that can really benefit a team. I love that they threw out all the misinformation about Brock Bowers, and you didn't really hear a lot about Fashanu. On our Locked On mock draft, we did a mock draft here on the Locked On Podcast Network recently, and every host played the general manager of their team, and I was the Jets GM, and I picked Fashanu. And because at the time I felt like, okay, this is the guy that makes sense for the Jets. And then I kind of second guessed myself because I didn't think that the Jets were really, there's just no buzz around him. It just didn't seem like the Jets were all that interested in him. And he didn't really seem like the type of lineman Joe Douglas drafts. Fashanu is more of a finesse guy. He's a pass blocker. Douglas tends to like the bigger guys, the more physical guys. So I didn't think he was the kind of guy the Jets would want. But the Jets ended up taking him. I think he's a fantastic prospect. I'm a huge fan of Olu Fashanu. I think he's the type of guy who conceivably, now he's not going to step right into the starting lineup immediately because the Jets have Tyron Smith to play left tackle. But he's the kind of guy who has the potential to be just somebody you stick at left tackle and you don't have to worry about the position for a long time. And that's something the Jets could use, because if you've been following the Jets since 2016, I mean, that's 8 years. That was the point where D'Brickashaw Ferguson retired after the 2015 season. The Jets have had issues trying to fill that spot ever since. Ryan Clady was not very good for the 1 year he was here. Kelvin Beachum was decent for the 3 years he was here, but then we had the Mekhi Becton experience. George Fant maybe gave you one decent season in 2021. And then, last year, everything that happened, Dwayne Brown, Becton himself really struggling. Jets it's a premium position. It's a very important position. The Jets have had trouble filling it. And I think that, you can talk about immediate needs. And I know there are some Brock Bowers fans out there who say Brock Bowers would have been a starter right off the bat. The Jets drafted the backup. It's not the worst thing in the world. And here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about where Olu Fashanu fits in with the New York Jets, both now and in the future. That's continuing this Friday edition of Locked On Jets after the first day of the 2024 NFL Draft. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Jets have it easy. They don't need LinkedIn Jobs. They have the NFL Draft, so they can just pick Olu Fashanu. But the Olu Fashanu your business needs isn't available through a draft. That's why you got to go to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not just a jobs board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have the time or resources to hire. Well, LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker and easier. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, Black and Mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and then bonus episodes for breaking news. Today, we are talking about the first round of the NFL draft. The New York Jets pick Olu Fashanu at 11th overall. The Jets entered the night with the 10th overall pick, but they made a trade down with the Minnesota Vikings, a move that I absolutely love. It's essentially like a free 4th-round pick. Not only that, but the Jets were able to swap a 6th-round pick for a 5th-round pick. So the Jets move up on day 3 and add an extra 4th-round pick. Just a fantastic move. But it was made even more fantastic, I think, by the Jets drafting Olu Fashanu, a prospect I'm a huge fan of. And Olu Fashanu, I think, brings something to the table now, and he brings something to the table for the long run for the New York Jets. Now, I know there are going to be some fans out there that say, well, the Jets drafted the backup in the first round. That's not the worst thing in the world. I think as Jets fans, we're so accustomed to the roster being so lousy that, a guy who's drafted high has to go into the lineup. In reality, this is the type of situation you like. You prefer a situation where you already have quality starters. The Jets have Tyron Smith at left tackle, Morgan Moses at right tackle. Maybe Fashanu can challenge Moses. I view him as more of like a longer-term left tackle because of his pass blocking skills. And he's not the greatest run blocker, which is typically what you want at the right tackle spot. But I think it's not, I don't think it's fair to say that Fashanu has no purpose for the team this year, because tackle depth is really important for any team, but it's especially important for a team like the New York Jets. And why do I say that? Well, Jets have 2 starting tackles who should be quality players, but both of them are 33 years of age. And as you may know, as players age through their careers, they become more likely to get injured. And offensive line is a spot, especially the tackle position, where injuries happen anyway. Freak injuries can happen on the offensive line because there's so many bodies, tangling on every play. You can just, like, a guy rolls the wrong way and you get your leg caught up in it. It could create a problem for your team. Few teams in the NFL have quality depth on the offensive line. Something I say frequently on this show, if you're an everydayer, you may have heard me say it in the past, is I feel like in the NFL, ideally you have 3 starting caliber tackles because somebody's going to get injured. But again, that's doubly true with the Jets, with a pair of tackles who are 33 years old, and one of whom in Tyron Smith, who's as big of an injury risk as you can have in the league at the tackle position. And look, Smith, when he's healthy, is a phenomenal player. Smith was a second-team All-Pro a year ago, but when he's healthy, is quite a qualifier. Smith is frequently not healthy. I mean, he hasn't played a full season without missing at least 3 games in 8 years. He's a guy you almost have to count on missing some time. And it's a challenge right now with Aaron Rodgers because Rodgers, the Jets quarterback, is 40 years old and coming off an Achilles injury. And Rodgers, through his career, has leaned on his mobility to an extent. Now, he's never been a guy you've designed, quarterback runs for, but he's a guy who's been able to buy himself some extra time. I think one of the things that set Rodgers apart from other quarterbacks is his ability to move left, to move right, to throw on the run. I don't know that that's going to be there this year for him. Coming off of serious injury that limits your mobility, also 40 years old. Back in 2022, his final season in Green Bay, if you watch the film, you saw that the mobility was already pretty diminished. That was 2 years ago before the injury. That, something that really does hurt your mobility as a quarterback, those Achilles injuries. So this means that Rodgers is probably going to be more confined to the pocket than he has at any point in his career. And that's not necessarily something that means Rodgers will be ineffective. Rodgers is still as smart as any quarterback in the NFL. I mean, if you listen to some of his teammates talk, they'll tell you like it's unbelievable some of the things he picks up on. He can spot the stance of a safety like lining up before the snap, and he'll find like something as small as that will tip him off to what the defense is doing. You hope the arm's also still good. We haven't seen the Rodgers arm in a while. The last time we saw him, it was still pretty good. So there's still a path for Rodgers to be good, to be very good. But he has to be able to play from within the pocket. And that means the Jets have to protect him. And Jets aren't going to be able to protect him unless they have quality players at the tackle position. And it goes back to what I said. There's a huge injury risk at the tackle position with these two older guys for the Jets. They had to get some youth in here. They had to get quality players. They had to get another quality tackle in here who could help them out. And, there were some names thrown out there, some older guys, some guys in their 30s. I don't want my insurance for guys in their 30s to be other guys in their 30s because you kind of run into the same problem. So I think Olu Fashanu, he plays an important role for the team this year. Because if you can keep Rodgers upright, there's a chance there's still a pretty good chance he's going to be a very effective player. But in the longer run, and you can talk all you want about win now, you can talk about being all in. It's okay to think a little bit about the longer run. Both of the Jets starting tackles, again, going back to what I said, 33 years old. Neither of them's under contract for the year 2025. Tackle's a really, really important position in the NFL. And you don't want to be 1 year away from having no solutions at the position. Jets were kind of in that spot a couple of months ago before they made the moves for Smith and Moses. But, I think it's important to view them for what they are. Those are stopgap moves. Those are bridge moves. Those are moves where Jets are trying to win this year. The Jets are kind of trying to build this airplane as it takes off. No pun intended because it is the Jets. Sorry for that. Sorry for that awful pun. But, the Jets are trying to kind of make this happen on the fly. Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses might be able to help you for this year, but they are not long-term solutions. And yeah, I understand that the Jets are more focused on the short term than they are on the long term, but you still have to think a little bit about the longer run. This team's going to exist after the year 2024, you would think. So it's not a bad thing that they actually drafted for the future. Yeah, I guess if you drafted Brock Bowers, he'd be able to step into the starting lineup. You'd have a day one starter. But how much does that really mean? You're talking about the actual contributions a draft pick makes. Typically, they're you don't focus on what a draft pick gives you year one. You focus on what they give you over the course of a long career. And something, I respect Brock Bowers. I know he could be a good player. He could be a very good player. He could conceivably be one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And despite everything I'm saying about Olu Fashanu, I understand there's no luck. There's no guarantees in this world. There's no guarantees when you're talking about a draft pick. But for where the Jets are at, first of all, the age of their tackles, the injury risk of their tackles. Second, the longer term trajectory of the tackle position. It would have been crazy to me to draft a tight end over the second. I know Latham went. I know he's technically the third tackle off the board because Latham went in the top 10 also. But it would have been crazy to me to take a tight end over the second best tackle in the class. So I think the Jets, again, I think this is a perfect fit for the New York Jets. I think that I don't think you could have found a series of moves that would work better for the New York Jets. Even as somebody who loves Roma Dunze, when you add in that trade down where you get that extra fourth round pick, so much to love about what the Jets did. But the draft is not over. And as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets, we're going to turn our attention to day 2 and even a little bit day 3. What could be in store for the New York Jets? Well, I'll tell you as we continue this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We've all been there either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure how your team can pull out a win. Of course, we're not talking about the 2024 Jets, but there are times where this happens. That's when you dig deep. You lift up your head and you say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. And of course, I'm talking about the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go. It lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with a ton of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless Monopoly boards that are dynamic. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with the wrecking ball. You can charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Again, it's Monopoly Go. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Friday after the Jets draft Olu Fashanu, 11th overall in the first round. That follows a trade down with the Minnesota Vikings where the Jets dropped one spot, going from 10 to 11, and they pick up an extra fourth-round pick along with a swap of a 6 for a 5. So the New York Jets now enter day 2 of the draft with still only one pick. The Jets own their third-round pick. It is pick 72. The Jets do not own their second-round pick because that went to Green Bay in the Aaron Rodgers trade. However, the Jets now kind of are in business on day 3 of the draft. They own 3 fourth-round picks, a fifth-round pick, a sixth-round pick, and the Mr. Relevant pick, the final pick of the draft in the 7th round. Especially those 3 fourth-round picks, make this very interesting. And the Jets now actually have some options entering day 2 of the draft. Now, if they wanted to really make a move and get into like the middle of the second round and trade up, it's conceivable they could do that. Now, if you go to like the classic chart that the Dallas Cowboys put together, and that's kind of the currency of the NFL. The league still uses that chart that the Cowboys put together in the early 90s that assigns a point value to each pick. Now, we've discussed on the show frequently that is not really an accurate gauge of how valuable picks truly are, but it's how the league views it. So it's how trades go down in this league. So if the Jets packaged their third-round pick and their 3 fourth-round picks, they could get as high as like 51, 52 according to the chart. So the Jets could potentially move into the second round. And if we're not packaging all 4 of those picks, they can still move into the second round, like an later part of the second round. The question is whether the Jets want to do that or not. And I think most people would say that Jets still are probably focusing on adding another pass catcher to help Aaron Rodgers out. When you look at what the Jets have right now, Garrett Wilson's a solid number 1 receiver. Mike Williams is a solid number 2 receiver. But after that, it's a little unclear. Tyler Conklin's okay, but nothing special. Breece Hall did a lot of damage out of the backfield, but he's a back. He's not a guy who's going to run a ton of complex routes. And there's also the question of Mike Williams coming off a torn ACL. Will he be ready for the season? That's unclear right now. And I think the Jets would probably have some peace of mind if they had a highly touted rookie, a second round caliber prospect ready to go for them. So it's possible they trade up. They've given themselves some flexibility now. And, one of my concerns heading into this draft was the lack of draft capital, being down a second round pick. Well, the Jets have done a good job recouping some of the lost value. Now with a third round pick and 3 fourth round picks, hey, I'd rather have a second round pick, but we've got some extra draft capital now in the meat of this draft class. And I understand if they want to trade up, and there's some really good receiver prospects available. I don't know if Ladd McConkey of Georgia, that's kind of my guy. I like Ladd McConkey a lot. I just think he's going to be a good player. Like, I don't know what his ceiling is, but I think the bust factor with a guy like Ladd McConkey is really, really low. But if they wanted to get him, or they wanted, there's some other guys available, they could move up for him. On the other hand, I kind of like the idea of just sitting with these picks because the draft is really about the long term. And again, I understand all in, I understand win now, and I understand the orders the Jets are under. I understand the Aaron Rodgers factor. I understand the owner's orders because the owner is not a patient guy. But, the Jets have really enveloped to the present quite a bit. The Jets, you can't be more all in than the Jets are right now. And I think it's okay to think about the future. And when you're talking about third or fourth round picks, you're not typically talking about the types of guys who are going to be able to step in on day 1 and make a big impact. There are some guys who may be able to be role players on day 1, but you're not talking about the types of guys who are really going to move the needle. Sometimes, occasionally, you find an outlier. It's great for your team if you can find somebody in the third round or the fourth round who could be a day 1 impact starter, but typically it takes a little bit more time. That said, a draft class that's viewed as pretty deep, where the quality, doesn't drop off. Probably it's not going to drop off until the 4th round is over. I like the idea of having a third and 3 fourths. Those are ample opportunities to add quality players to this team. And even if they're not going to have as immediate of an impact as a guy you draft in the second round, I think, every team on some levels, balancing the here and now with the future. And I don't think that's any different. That should be any different with the New York Jets. Even if the Jets are really pushing the envelope for the here and now, I like the discipline that they showed, by not trading up. Because one of the points I've made in the weeks leading up to the draft is, look, Rome Odunze was my guy. I really wanted him. But at the 10th overall pick, you still had every opportunity to find a heck of a prospect. And that's what I think Olu Fashanu is. And if you asked me, would you rather have a Dunze or Fashanu? I might say a Dunze if all things are equal. But if I have to send picks out to move up for a Dunze, or I can get Fashanu and add a pick by trading down, I'm probably going to take Fashanu and adding the pick by trading down. Because in the NFL draft, it's about quality, but it's also about quantity. And sometimes the way you find quality is through quantity. So, every single study, every single piece of research that's been done about draft picks through the years shows the teams that draft the best, there's one thing in common with them. They just have the most picks. Drafting is a very, very inexact science. You are projecting, 22, 23, 24-year-olds, sometimes even 20, 21-year-olds, how they're going to perform at a higher level of football than they've ever played before. Dealing with a more complex playbook, dealing with different coaching, dealing with football as your full-time job versus when you're in college, when you're still kind of a student. It's not really, there's limits to the practice time you can get every day. And there's some things that are just unpredictable, like, is a player going to get injured? You have to predict how a player is going to handle getting a big payday, getting an NFL size contract where you're getting at least a six-figure salary. You're going to have the same work ethic. These are things that are really tough to project, and teams do their best to make the guesses educated, but they're still guesses, and there's still plenty of margin for error. And when you have extra picks, it builds in margin for error because nobody bats 1,000 in the draft. And if you are able to add extra picks, it gives you the opportunity to make up for your misses. So I understand the idea, if you want to see the Jets trade up, you want to see the Jets get back into the second round. Look, they have the ammo to do it now. Part of the reason that trade down was so good is that adding that extra 4th round pick, and even moving up into the 5th round, adding a 5th round pick, gives the Jets more resources, gives the Jets more options. If there's a player they really, really love in the second round, now they could potentially move up for that player. But I also like the idea of just standing pat, because if you're gonna get 3 4th round picks a year like this, where the class is used very deep on top of your 3rd round pick, you have the chance to have a really successful draft. And I was skeptical of the Jets' ability to have a successful draft without a 2nd round pick, because that's a tough thing to do. 2nd round is the money round in many draft classes. And you look at the Jets' struggles over the last 13 years. Well, you look no further than how poorly they've handled the 2nd round. You gotta hit on the 2nd round if you want to build a successful franchise. But great teams are also built in the 3rd and 4th round, and the Jets now, with a surplus of picks in those rounds, have an opportunity to do some big things in this year's draft. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy day 2 of the draft. We'll be back next time to talk more Jets.